No more watching movies.
I'm gonna make a movie!
So after 16 years of waiting, Clerks III is finally upon us. Is it a worthy successor to the first two films? Is it in the pile of good Kevin Smith movies? Or is it in the pile of woeful, terrible Kevin Smith movies?
Jay and Silent Bob are like C-3PO and R2-D2. They've been here since the first movie, which was the last time they were cool.
Clerks has left a huge impact on everyone who would call themselves a fan of Kevin Smith and his View Askew universe, and it's a big deal for everyone who really cares about these characters, Dante and Randall, played respectively by Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson across all three movies, and so to see them reunite for what seems like the third and final time to cap off a trilogy, a Clerks trilogy, wow, that's weird to say, is huge. I was not around, I did not exist at the time of the first Clerks movie's release, so I can't say that I was privy to that, but I would definitely say that the Clerks movies were very special to me during a very formative time in my life when I was growing up. They were shown to me by someone who I consider a very important mentor in my life, who got me into movies and movie making and being invested in films, and it came at a time when I was expanding my palette, if it were, for other kinds of movies. And also, like, I have a best friend who reminds me of the Dante and Randall dynamic. I don't know which one of us is Dante and which one of us is Randall. It kind of switches.
You're the most hideous fucking chud I've ever met.
But talking about Star Wars, shooting the shit, and generally being inseparable is something that I have in my own life, and I basically feel like the Clerks movies reflect my own life and my own time growing up, and both in the fact that they've brought me so much joy and so much laughter amongst me and my friends, and then also that they have shown me truisms in friendship and life and personal relationships. So the third film was something I was anticipating for many, many years, and it is just surreal that it's finally here and that I'm watching more Dante and Randall footage. It's just very strange, and I got teary-eyed just at the opening, just seeing them pop up. So for those of you that have seen the third movie and know what it's all about, you'll know that I had no chance for the remainder of the screening. I was weeping. And because I feel like Clerks is so special to me, and the second movie is one of my favourite comedies, and I really just love these characters, I feel like it really works for me that Kevin Smith takes Clerks 3 and uses it to talk about his own career, where he's ended up in life, and ultimately what these movies and what movie making means to him. But before I get into all the ins and outs, let's cut to a quick word from our sponsor. Bloodline Heroes of Lithas, where new legends will be born. Bloodline is a hero collector fantasy RPG in 3D graphics where you collect champions, build kingdoms, and create legendary heirs to your houses by combining the forces of various bloodlines such as orcs, lycans, demons, and dragonborn. Customize your champions by marrying different bloodlines and developing the family tree until you find a unique combination of any 5 powerful abilities out of dozens that suit your own gameplay style. The possibilities are endless. Play with easy-to-use controls while you build kingdoms, find a companion, and raise an heir, gaining the best traits from both parents. The higher your companion's intimacy, the more powerful your offspring, and you can even swap the genders of your companions freely. Lycanists are a must-try werewolf clan of assassins with a sleek design. Using my link, get an exclusive starter pack worth $30, including 200 diamonds, 2 summoning crystals, and 5 stamina potions. Try out Bloodline Heroes of Lithas, where new legends will be born. It's free to play for both Android and iOS. So spoilers for the rest of the review, but basically I really liked it, for better or for worse, against some of its misgivings. I think it's the weakest film in the Clerks trilogy. Oh, still so weird to say. But I think it is a satisfying conclusion to their stories, and I had a lot of the big feels afterwards. I sort of cycled back from the cinema, just kind of silently, still kind of a bit teary. Kevin Smith is a filmmaker that even the most ardent Kevin Smith fans will probably be the first people to admit that he chucks out a bevy of stinkers every now and then, and it really comes down to, for me, whether or not Kevin Smith feels like he has something to say and he has a purposeful reason for making the movie that he's making. And I think when he has that in the bag, we often get something really special and really heartwarming, and when he doesn't, we get something so bad it's like a 1-star picture. He's a really erratic filmmaker in terms of quality, and it means that, you know, when you come to something like Clerks III, you don't know whether you're going to get a Tusk, which I really enjoyed, or a Jay and Silent Bob reboot. I loved when Kevin Smith as Silent Bob, who gets one customary line in every Clerks movie, says that he's a fucking filmmaker, and I felt that, and it communicated to me that this is actually going to be a Kevin Smith movie with his heart and soul put into it. Clerks 3 is not a cop-out like Cop-Out. Clerks is his golden goose. It's the film that kickstarted his whole career. It's an absolute landmark in indie cinema, and it's kind of like a bible for filmmakers on wanting to make something on a micro budget. Clerks 1 is more of a feat of filmmaking, and it's more important to the canon of cinema, but Clerks 2 for me is the superior movie. I think moving it out of the quick stop and shooting it in the movies means it's way better shot, and I think it's a better script that's more focused. I know a lot of people don't like the second movie and feel like it kind of retreads some of the similar beats from the first film, but I actually think it is a better made film, and I think the introduction of Becky was such a masterstroke, because I think she's probably pound for pound the best character in the whole series, and I love her dynamic with Dante, and I think their love story is the heart of that movie, and it all comes to a head in the ABC dance number, which I think for any other filmmaker would be incredibly trite and corny, but somehow Kevin Smith always manages to pull these things off, and I think it's because you really feel the warmth and earnest feeling through the screen. I love that moment, I love that dance number, and I think it perfectly captures what it feels like to be in love with someone. Clerks 2 got a perfect ending, and so I was worried going into this one that they would undo things kind of in a similar way to the Before trilogy. You know, like when you make a sequel to things that either have definite ending, stakes in the ground, or even some ambiguity, you risk opening that up and ruining that by revisiting certain characters. And the Before trilogy and the Clerks films are very similar in that sense, in that I could go back and revisit those characters every 10-15 years and catch up with them in their new status quos and see where they've moved on in their lives and get kind of a slice of them, because you're sort of growing up and living your life alongside them living theirs. So it was very risky to open up the Clerks 2 ending with Clerks 3, but I think they more or less nailed it, aside from one massive thing, which I'm going to go into in a minute.
You put in that stuff you used to say about the Death Star contractors.
Get sued by Disney? No way.
Clerks 3 has been long gestating for Kevin Smith. He tried to get it made all throughout the 2010s. Jeff Anderson, who plays Randall, pulled out of a version of the script in 2017, and it was only after Kevin Smith had his unfortunate heart attack in 2018 that he revisited the concept of the movie and tore up the original script and rewrote it from page one. The original version of the script was going to be about New Jersey and Hurricane Sandy, and it was going to be about Randall dealing with the theme of grief through the destruction of the quick stop and him making a ramshackle quick stop. And I could see why that would be interesting, but I feel like Jeff Anderson probably pulled out for a reason, and I think Kevin Smith was ultimately right to remake it, because I think what we get in the final product is a more interesting premise than that, even though it could come off as more self-indulgent. Because this film is basically about Randall and Dante coming to terms with their mortality, the twilight stages of their lives, and looking back and finding purpose. I think it's got a strong emotional through line, and I think, as ever, these films are held up by the central relationship between Dante and Randall.
Mr. Dante! I need an ambulance at the quick stop!
Before I get to the big, massive spoilers, which need a lot of chat, I just want to talk about a couple of different funny aspects of the movie, or things that I enjoyed. The Ben Affleck cameo was glorious, as ever. Fockers 1, perfection. Fantastic. I love that we see the return of Elias and that he is now a crypto-Christian who turns into a Satanist when he believes that he caused Randall's heart attack. Very funny character, great to see him come back from Clerks II. And it's just really sobering to see Dante and Randall in the modern age. It's weird to hear them referencing TikTok and CGI Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian, and it's weird to see Harley Quinn Smith stacking oat milk as opposed to regular milk. Oh, how the times have changed. I mean, I probably shouldn't even divulge this on Full Fat videos, but I don't even drink real milk anymore. I drink oat milk all the time, oat milk all the way. It's way tastier, it's less bloating, you get like a porridgey aftertaste. It's fantastic, you know. Oh, how the times have changed from 2018. I would have liked to have seen what Elias ended up thinking of the first Transformers movie as referenced in Clerks 2, including the entire Michael Bay franchise, and I would have loved to have seen what Dante and Randall really thought of the Star Wars sequel trilogy and the copious amounts of streaming shows we are now bombarded with on Disney+, but I think Kevin Smith was smart to keep the references fairly stripped back. There's no long diatribe about Death Star contractors or why the Lord of the Rings trilogy is not as good as the Star Wars trilogy. As funny as those moments are in the previous movies, I think we've moved on to a point in pop culture where the conversations that Randall and Dante are having are no longer very unique. You could see a million of them on scrolling on TikTok. You get a taste of that when I'm speaking to you here, and everyone and their mums knows who Thanos and Gloop Shitto are. So it's definitely a sign of the times that we're now at the stage where Dante and Randall don't need to really talk about these things, and I think it opens the film up to focus on what it wants to focus on, which is Randall finding a purpose. And I love the idea that he decides to become a filmmaker. I think it's easy to see it as falling into self-referential indulgence with Kevin Smith remaking his first movie, but I think it serves a nice purpose. I think it makes sense for Randall, and I think it's a nice way for conflict to arise between him and Dante.
Kill me off in the third act? What if there's a sequel?
A sequel? What am I, a hack?
Another thing I will say is that this looks much worse than Clerks 2, I think because they had to go back to the quick stop, and the quick stop is inherently just not very cinematic, very tight, very close quarters location. We get a lot of like two shots front on, and you know, a lot of the cinematography ends up being coverage, whereas, you know, not that I look for incredible cinematography in comedies, but Clerks 2 definitely has more of a sheen. For example, the ABC dance number, that's really well shot, whereas there's nothing really like that in this movie. It definitely feels like it has more of the scrappy cheapness of the first Clerks film, which I guess makes sense because we have returned to the quick stop. So I'm not going to put it off any longer. Let's talk about the strangely morbid things in Clerks 3. When I saw that it said that Becky died in 2006 on the counter when Dante enters the quick stop, I thought, this is the setup for a gag. We got shown the first still of the movie a year ago, and it had Rosario Dawson with the rest of the cast at the quick stop, so I just thought we're going to catch up with them 16 years later, after they've had their baby, after they've gotten married, after they've lived their life. But no, they really committed to it. Becky is dead. She dies just after the second Clerks movie. The happy ending that you got at the end of Clerks 2 is null and void. This is the kind of characters you care about dying in between sequels that could rival Newton Hicks. It really does. I was devastated, sat in the cinema like, what? Becky's dead? Dante and Becky didn't get the happy ending? That is gut-wrenching. I can't believe this. Like, why, Kevin? Why did you do this? I wonder if maybe Rosario Dawson couldn't commit to being a lead in the film. She is way bigger than the rest of the cast combined. They're pretty much just Kevin Smith alumni. So maybe that was why her role was minimised. Maybe she couldn't do it due to scheduling, because she is, of course, Ahsoka, which is now very weird that Dante ended up marrying, or, well, the love of his life was a huge Star Wars actor.
There's only 1 return, okay? And it ain't of the king, it's of the Jedi.
And another thing I will say is that this looks much worse than Clerks 2. I think because they had to go back to the quick stop, maybe she couldn't do it due to scheduling, because she is, of course, Ahsoka, which is now very weird that Dante ended up marrying, or, well, the love of his life was a huge Star Wars actor. There's only 1 return, okay? And it ain't of the king, it's of the Jedi. Either way, yeah, it's strange. It's a tough pill to swallow, the idea that Becky passed away. It's funny because I think it kind of conjures a similar feeling that I had to the Star Wars sequel trilogy, of which Dante and Randall no doubt will have seen, because you have those perfect endings with those characters in Episode 6 in Return of the Jedi, and then when you have a sequel that has a huge time jump in between them and you're reunited with these characters except they're a lot older, you want to imagine that everything went well for them, and then to see like Han and Luke and Leia and now Dante and Randall go through such hardships and admit that, oh, you know, actually our lives kind of ended up sucking is hard as an audience member because you care about them. But I understand that when you make a sequel, obviously you need to create new conflicts in these characters, you need to have things that they need to get resolved in order for the story to function. So I understand why Becky was killed off, but it does seem exceptionally mean-spirited for a comedy, and I can't help but wonder what the film would have been like had she been alive and well at the start of the movie. Because this also feeds into the second death of the movie, which is, again, insane. But Dante passes away in this movie, and it brings about a close to the decades-long friendship between Dante and Randall. Dante tells Randall that he is selfish and impolite and a bum, essentially, and it gives Randall that final push to go to Dante and say, look at the movie that we made, you are my best friend, you are the main character in my life, and that's why I've recut it for it to be you. And again, as with the ABC dance number, cutting to Clerks I is incredibly trite on paper, but for some reason Kevin Smith just makes that shit work. I thought it was very powerful and very emotional, and it was the right time for Dante to pass away, and I was questioning whether they were going to commit to it, but I think given the fact that Becky's death was committed to at the start of the movie, I think it makes sense that they committed to that as well. And it's just an ending you never thought you would get. Randall without Dante. It's very melancholic and very sobering, but I think it feels right for Randall to grow in the wake of losing that friendship. And I love the idea Kevin Smith talks about at the end of the movie, during the credits, that Randall became a filmmaker in his own right and lived the ripe old age of 90 and never forgot his friend, and realised that the thing that made the quick stop work was the people that came in. I think very much this movie is about the fact that very few things in life really matter other than the people that you spend your experiences with, and I think that's why their friendship and why Dante and Becky's relationship from the second movie are so potent and so powerful. And I think the movie, in spite of its darker moments, is quite an uplifting movie, and I just thought it was a rollercoaster from beginning to end, just seeing these characters again one final time. I do wonder if Dante's ending and death had played better had Becky been alive. It seems kind of mean-spirited for them to both die so kind of horrifically, but at the same time, you know, like the kind of more magical side to the View Askew universe shines through a bit in this, and you get to see them be reunited in the afterlife and go off and live together. And you know, like, obviously Dogma is set in this universe, so I can kind of buy that when Dante is standing next to Randall in that very final shot, his spirit is really there with him. And I guess that comes down to really what you believe and how you see those relationships, but I think there's something very heartwarming in the final image of the series being that no matter what happens, even though Dante may no longer be in the physical world, he is still in Randall's heart and will be forever. Yeah, it's a very strange movie, but I feel like Kevin Smith put a lot of heart into this, no pun intended, and I think he used a personal tragedy to fuel his writing in a way that feels very true and I like that we got to examine these characters one more time, and even though not everything did go happily ever after for them, I think it ends on a note that just makes me reminded of why I love these characters in the first place. And on top of that, I had a lot of laughs. There's some great gags in this one. Jay and Silent Bob now owning a legal marijuana store but still deciding to sell it on the street in a clandestine manner is hilarious. Everything with Elias is comedy gold, and I still love the interplay between Dante and Randall. And the doctors treating the heart surgery were also hilarious. Great cameo from Justin Long, although it is the second best Justin Long film of 2022 because Barbarian is a thing and that movie was fantastic. So go out and see that now if you haven't seen it. But yeah, I don't know, it's left me feeling very somber and it got me very emotional to see these characters after such a long time, and perhaps this is probably the most biased take I've ever had on the channel because I see that there are a lot of flaws with this movie. I think it is very cheaply made at a time where Kevin Smith doesn't really have an excuse for that anymore, and it takes some turns in the story that I think are big swings that I'm still wondering whether they really worked, but I just love that it really felt like Kevin Smith had something to say here, and I think by the time the film finishes it comes round to a really uplifting, passionate and optimistic note, and it's nice that Randall got his ending and Dante did too. Oh god, it's weird. I was going to say before I did this review that I was happy to keep seeing Dante and Randall every 10 years, every 15 years, like the before characters, but as it turns out, who knew that Dante was actually going to perish? It's mental, man. It's such a strange feeling to spend so many years with those characters on and off, and then to see their stories come to a close like that. It's very emotional, very emotional. I wonder what Kevin Smith is going to do next, but honestly, I think if this was his last movie, I think it would be a fine swan song. I don't know what else he has to really do. I don't really want to see Mallrats 2, or Chasing Amy 2, or Dogma 2. I definitely don't want to see more Jay and Silent Bob reboots, as much as I like those characters. That movie was atrocious. And I feel like Kevin Smith has capped off his filmography and has been very open in this movie in that, I think he admits his flaws as a filmmaker, and that perhaps he didn't become one of America's great filmmakers like he was touted as in the 90s, but I still think he has never let go of what made him special in the first place, and he shows that here. So yeah, go out and watch Clerks 3. I saw it in a cinema alone, save for one other person, and she was sat on the other corner of the cinema, and you could occasionally hear her laughing or me laughing. I would have loved for a packed out screening, but that's just not the way cinema operates anymore, because we are inundated with blockbusters and IP driven animation. So that was very sad, but if you do have a chance to catch Clerks 3 in the cinema, I implore you to do so. A big thank you to my full fat tier patron, Dr. Chike. If you'd like to donate money to my Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/fullfatvideos. If you'd like to find me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can find me at fullfatvideos.